guys, in this video we will be talking about pre-Columbian America. We are going to compare the major political, economic, social, and cultural developments of the Maya, Inca, and Aztec civilizations. We are going to summarize the major ideas that developed in the Maya, Inca, and Aztec civilizations. And when we are done, you will be able to summarize characteristics of Mayan, Aztec, and Inca civilizations by creating a grapes comparison chart. Okay, so first we'll talk about the first Americans, the first people to settle in North, Central, and South America. So Mesoamerica is the area that can be found here. It's present-day Mexico and Central America. The area is known for having a lot of tropical rainforests, so it sustains a lot of life. There are several theories as to how people settled in these areas, and one of them says that there's a land bridge between Alaska and Asia that people were able to walk over, and as they're following food, they're migrating south and then ended up settling in these more favorable climates. There's also a theory that a lot of people sailed from these Pacific islands here and landed on these western shore of North America. Remember that continents have drifted apart over time, so when these voyages were taken, it's very likely that the continents were closer together, and so the journey was not as long or as difficult as it would be today. But nonetheless, the people that migrated to the continent did follow food south and ended up settling in these areas. The first civilizations that we know of in Mesoamerica are the Olmecs and the Toltecs. There's not a whole lot that we know. They don't leave a lot of written records, but artifacts suggest that they were the oldest civilizations, and they're going to influence the following civilizations. So the first one we're going to discuss in detail is the Maya. They emerged around 1500 BC, and they lasted all the way until 1546 AD. They were located in present-day Guatemala. So in your notes, you have a blank map. Make sure that you highlight the area that the Maya were located in here in the Yucatan Peninsula. Their government was divided into several city-states, and each city had a chief ruler. They were sort of a theocracy because their rulers were considered half man and half god, so they had some religious power. So here's a pyramid of the Mayan social structure. At the top you have your rulers or emperors. The priests and nobility follow them. The merchants and artisans hold a special class here. And then you have peasants beneath them and the slave class at the bottom. The majority of the people in the Mayan society were farmers. Their main staple was corn. That's what most of the crops were and what sustained their civilization. There was a very small group of people who were the craftsmen and your merchants. They made luxuries for the nobility. And then you also have the nobility, which is a hereditary class. You had to be born into it. It's not something you could work yourself up to. That's where the priests were also located, and they're the ones who perform the religious ceremonies, and they also assist the rulers. So the Mayan had very great achievements. They built huge cities in the jungle, and in these cities you could find a lot of large palaces, temples, and pyramids. The Mayan ruins are one of the most popular tourist destinations in Central America. So if you ever go on a cruise to the Yucatan Peninsula, they usually take you to these areas to visit. As far as writing, they had their own system of hieroglyphics, and they also used the zero in math. The Mayan also had a very accurate 365-day calendar that was based on the seasons. This is the calendar that they stopped counting in 2012, and there was a prophecy that the world would end because that's when the Mayan calendar ended. It looks like they just got tired of counting, and so the world continued past 2012. The Mayans also spent a lot of time beautifying their buildings with colorful murals, and they even spent time playing a popular ball game in the area. So the Mayan civilization began to decline due to constant warfare. There was a lot of neighboring groups that were pushing into their territory, and so their power began to diminish. The reason why the Mayan civilization disappeared is unknown. Possible reasons include a food shortage or maybe a disease epidemic or some sort of great war. But for some reason, the Mayan civilization did disappear, and it could have also gotten blended in to other neighboring groups. And that brings us to the Aztecs. So again, take your maps and highlight the area where the Aztecs were located around 1200 to 1521 AD. The Aztecs were in the Valley of Mexico, in this area here. There was very high elevation and also a temperate climate that allowed for a lot of agriculture and very, very fertile soil. So they grew corn just like the Mayan and other crops, but corn is usually the staple in this area. And because their environment was a little bit difficult to farm in, they were able to modify it to suit their needs by using floating gardens. And here is an image of what the floating gardens may have looked like. So these were created so that they could use the fertile soil near the water and irrigate their crops, and then they could travel around to each little field through ships, small boats. So let's look at their social structure. Here's the pyramid of their social structure. You have the ruler and his family at the top. Your government officials, your priests, and also high-ranking warriors were highly respected. You have your commoners, those who are not of noble blood, and then beneath them you have your peasants. So the commoners are more like a a middle class, and then your peasants are the people who work the fields. At the bottom you have slaves. The emperor in the civilization is all-powerful, makes all the rules. And then you have nobility who serve in the government and in the military, and then the priests. Your commoners are your farmers, fishermen, craftsmen, and warriors, people who have a skill. And then beneath them you have slaves who are captured in war. So the Aztec religion was polytheistic. That means they worshipped many gods, and their most important god was the sun god. They were a very warlike society. They go around trying to conquer neighboring groups, and they also participate in a lot of religious ceremonies that involve human sacrifice. They sacrifice captured warriors. They will also take volunteers from their own communities, and they participate in cannibalism. So the Aztecs believed that if you ate the body part of a person who possessed a special skill or quality, that you would intake that skill or quality. So if they had a warrior who was very fast, they would eat his legs. If there was someone who was brave, they would eat his heart. Someone who was smart, they would eat his brain. So they could try to usurp that quality for themselves. As far as their achievements go, lots of influence on modern culture. They also used the zero, and they had an accurate calendar based on seasons, but they developed gum, chocolate, and popcorn, which are still very popular in our civilization. As far as education, the Aztecs required everyone to go to school, and education was free for all. Alright, that brings us to the Inca. So once again, highlight the area where the Inca lived on your map. They're located on the Pacific coast of South America, near the Andes Mountains, and it would be in the present-day countries of Peru, Ecuador, Bolivia, and Chile. They also got very creative with their agriculture. They used terrace farming as a way to modify the environment. They were able to carve steps into the mountainside to create fields where they could grow crops on this very fertile land that's along the mountainsides. Their main staple is actually potatoes. They also grew other crops like yams, and they used llamas and alpacas for meat, wool, and labor as well. Okay, so here is an image of the terrace farming. So you see the city is up at the top, and then along these steps they would grow crops. So they got very creative with modifying their environment. Alright, the Inca were able to build thousands of miles of stone roads to connect their cities. They also had very strong stone buildings that were constructed very high up in the mountains. The most famous Inca city is Machu Picchu, which is still a huge tourist destination, and a lot of people try to visit, but they can't make the journey all the way up. Sometimes they get sick from the altitude, or they just get too exhausted from climbing up. So it's really wondrous to see how people without modern technology were able to build these cities high up in the mountains. The Inca didn't have a written language. But they did communicate and keep records using a system called quipu, which are bundles of knotted and colored ropes that they used for counting and communication. And that brings us to journal entry number 20. Answer this question: how were early Mesoamerican civilizations similar to River Valley civilizations in the East? So remember when we talked about Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt, ancient India, and ancient China, and their characteristics, think about how there are similarities between those civilizations and the Mesoamerican civilizations, and give at least 3 of those examples. Okay. And lastly, you have a really quick activity. You are going to make a chart in your notebook to compare and contrast Maya, Aztec, and Inca civilizations. So it's a grapes chart, so you have geography, religion, achievements, politics, economics, and social structure. You can use examples from your notes, or you can research some online, but I want at least 3 points on each of these squares. So 3 examples of geography of the Maya, of the Aztec, and the Inca, and that's going to go again in your notebooks. If you guys have any questions, bring them to me when you get to class, and thank you for watching.